Welcome back to A Clock in the Journal, where timeless tales come alive. Today we step into a thrilling battle of wits as the legendary gentleman thief Arsène Lupin faces the brilliant detective Herlock Sholmes. A story of intellect, strategy, and daring pursuits awaits. Let's begin. Chapter 1v. Light in the Darkness. However well-tempered a man's character may be, and Herlock Sholmes is one of those men over whom ill fortune has little or no hold, there are circumstances wherein the most courageous combatant feels the necessity of marshalling his forces before risking the chances of a battle. "I shall take a vacation today," said Sholmes. "And what shall I do?" asked Wilson. "You, Wilson, let me see." "You can buy some underwear and linen to replenish our wardrobe, while I take a rest." "Very well, Sholmes. I will watch while you sleep." Wilson uttered these words with all the importance of a sentinel on guard at the outpost, and therefore exposed to the greatest danger. His chest was expanded, his muscles were tense. Assuming a shrewd look, he scrutinized, officially, the little room in which they had fixed their abode. "Very well, Wilson, you can watch. I shall occupy myself in the preparation of a line of attack more appropriate to the methods of the enemy we are called upon to meet. Do you see, Wilson, we have been deceived in this fellow Lupin. My opinion is that we must commence at the very beginning of this affair, and even before that, if possible. But have we sufficient time?" "9 days, dear boy. That is 5 too many." The Englishman spent the entire afternoon in smoking and sleeping. He did not enter upon his new plan of attack until the following day. Then he said, "Wilson, I am ready. Let us attack the enemy." "Lead on, Macduff," exclaimed Wilson, full of martial ardor. "I wish to fight in the front rank." "Oh, have no fear. I shall do credit to my king and country, for I am an Englishman." In the first place, Sholmes had 3 long and important interviews with Monsieur de Tenant, whose rooms he examined with the greatest care and precision, with Suzanne Gerbois, whom he questioned in regard to the blonde lady, and with Sister Auguste, who had retired to the convent of the Visitandines since the murder of Baron d'Hautrec. At each of these interviews, Wilson had remained outside, and each time he asked, "Satisfactory?" "Quite so." "I was sure we were on the right track." They paid a visit to the 2 houses adjoining that of the late Baron d'Hautrec in the avenue Henri Martin. Then they visited the Rue Clapeyron, and, while he was examining the front of number 25, Sholmes said, "All these houses must be connected by secret passages, but I can't find them." For the first time in his life, Wilson doubted the omnipotence of his famous associate. Why did he now talk so much and accomplish so little? "Why?" exclaimed Sholmes, in answer to Wilson's secret thought. "Because, with this fellow Lupin, a person has to work in the dark, and instead of deducting the truth from established facts, a man must extract it from his own brain, and afterward learn if it is supported by the facts in the case." "But what about the secret passages?" "They must exist. But even though I should discover them, and thus learn how Arsène Lupin made his entrance to the lawyer's house, and how the blonde lady escaped from the house of Baron d'Hautrec after the murder, what good would it do? How would it help me? Would it furnish me with a weapon of attack?" "Let us attack him just the same," exclaimed Wilson, who had scarcely uttered these words when he jumped back with a cry of alarm. Something had fallen at their feet. It was a bag filled with sand which might have caused them serious injury if it had struck them. Sholmes looked up. Some men were working on a scaffolding attached to the balcony at the 5th floor of the house. He said, "We were lucky. 1 step more, and that heavy bag would have fallen on our heads. I wonder if—" Moved by a sudden impulse, he rushed into the house, up the 5 flights of stairs, rang the bell, pushed his way into the apartment to the great surprise and alarm of the servant who came to the door, and made his way to the balcony in front of the house. But there was no one there. "Where are the workmen who were here a moment ago?" he asked the servant. "They have just gone." "Which way did they go?" "By the servants' stairs." Sholmes leaned out of the window. He saw 2 men leaving the house, carrying bicycles. They mounted them and quickly disappeared around the corner. How long have they been working on this scaffolding? Those men? Only since this morning. It's their first day. Sholmes returned to the street and joined Wilson. Together they returned to the hotel, and thus the second day ended in a mournful silence. On the following day, their program was almost similar. They sat together on a bench in the avenue Henri Martin, much to Wilson's disgust, who did not find it amusing to spend long hours watching the house in which the tragedy had occurred. "What do you expect, Sholmes? That Arsène Lupin will walk out of the house?" "No." "That the blonde lady will make her appearance?" "No." "What then?" "I am looking for something to occur, some slight incident that will furnish me with a clue to work on. And if it does not occur, then I must myself create the spark that will set fire to the powder." A solitary incident, and that of a disagreeable nature, broke the monotony of the forenoon. A gentleman was riding along the avenue when his horse suddenly turned aside in such a manner that it ran against the bench on which they were sitting, and struck Sholmes a slight blow on the shoulder. "Ha!" exclaimed Sholmes. "A little more, and I would have had a broken shoulder." The gentleman struggled with his horse. The Englishman drew his revolver and pointed it, but Wilson seized his arm and said, "Don't be foolish. What are you going to do? Kill the man?" "Leave me alone, Wilson. Let go." During the brief struggle between Sholmes and Wilson, the stranger rode away. "Now you can shoot," said Wilson triumphantly, when the horseman was at some distance. "Wilson, you're an idiot. Don't you understand that the man is an accomplice of Arsène Lupin?" Sholmes was trembling from rage. Wilson stammered pitifully. "What? That man? An accomplice?" "Yes, the same as the workman who tried to drop the bag of sand on us yesterday." "It can't be possible." "Possible or not, there was only one way to prove it." "By killing the man?" "No, by killing the horse. If you hadn't grabbed my arm, I should have captured one of Lupin's accomplices. Now, do you understand the folly of your act?" Throughout the afternoon, both men were morose. They did not speak a word to each other. At 5 o'clock they visited the Rue Clapeyron, but were careful to keep at a safe distance from the houses. However, 3 young men who were passing through the street, arm in arm singing, ran against Sholmes and Wilson and refused to let them pass. Sholmes, who was in an ill humor, contested the right of way with them. After a brief struggle, Sholmes resorted to his fists. He struck one of the men a hard blow on the chest, another a blow on the face, and thus subdued 2 of his adversaries. Thereupon the 3 of them took to their heels and disappeared. "Ah!" exclaimed Sholmes, "that does me good. I needed a little exercise." But Wilson was leaning against the wall. Sholmes said, "What's the matter, old chap? You're quite pale." Wilson pointed to his left arm, which hung inert, and stammered, "I don't know what it is. My arm pains me." "Very much? Is it serious?" "Yes, I am afraid so." He tried to raise his arm, but it was helpless. Sholmes felt it, gently at first, then in a rougher way. To see how badly it was hurt, he said. He concluded that Wilson was really hurt, so he led him to a neighboring pharmacy, where a closer examination revealed the fact that the arm was broken and that Wilson was a candidate for the hospital. In the meantime, they bared his arm and applied some remedies to ease his suffering. "Come, come, old chap, cheer up," said Sholmes, who was holding Wilson's arm. "In 5 or 6 weeks you will be all right again, but I will pay them back. The rascals. Especially Lupin, for this is his work. No doubt of that. I swear to you if ever." He stopped suddenly, dropped the arm, which caused Wilson such an access of pain that he almost fainted. And, striking his forehead, Sholmes said, "Wilson, I have an idea. You know, I have one occasionally." He stood for a moment, silent, with staring eyes, and then muttered in short, sharp phrases, "Yes, that's it. That will explain all, right at my feet. And I didn't see it. Ah, parbleu! I should have thought of it before. Wilson, I shall have good news for you." Abruptly leaving his old friend, Sholmes ran into the street and went directly to the house known as number 25. On one of the stones, to the right of the door, he read this inscription: "Destange Architect, 1875. There was a similar inscription on the house number 23. Of course, there was nothing unusual in that. But what might be read on the houses in the avenue Henri Martin? A carriage was passing. He engaged it and directed the driver to take him to number 134 Avenue Henri Martin. He was roused to a high pitch of excitement. He stood up in the carriage and urged the horse to greater speed. He offered extra pourboires to the driver. Quicker, quicker! How great was his anxiety as they turned from the Rue de la Pompe. Had he caught a glimpse of the truth at last? On one of the stones of the late Baron's house he read the words, Destange, Architect, 1874, and a similar inscription appeared on the two adjoining houses. The reaction was such that he settled down in the seat of the carriage, trembling from joy. At last, a tiny ray of light had penetrated the dark shadows which encompassed these mysterious crimes. In the vast somber forest wherein 1,000 pathways crossed and recrossed, he had discovered the first clue to the track followed by the enemy. He entered a branch post office and obtained telephonic connection with the Château de Crozon. The Countess answered the telephone call. "Hello, is that you, madame?" "Monsieur Sholmes, isn't it? Everything going all right?" "Quite well, but I wish to ask you one question." "Hello." "Yes, I hear you." "Tell me, when was the Château de Crozon built?" "It was destroyed by fire and rebuilt about 30 years ago." "Who built it? And in what year?" "There is an inscription on the front of the house which reads, Lucien Destange, Architect, 1877. "Thank you, madame. That is all. Goodbye." He went away, murmuring, "Destange. Lucien Destange. That name has a familiar sound." He noticed a public reading room, entered, consulted a dictionary of modern biography, and copied the following information. Lucien Destange, born 1840, Grand Prix de Rome, officer of the Legion of Honor, author of several valuable books on architecture, etc. Then he returned to the pharmacy and found that Wilson had been taken to the hospital. There Sholmes found him with his arm in splints and shivering with fever. "Victory! Victory!" cried Sholmes. "I hold one end of the thread." "Of what thread?" "The one that leads to victory. I shall now be walking on solid ground, where there will be footprints, clues." "Cigarette ashes?" asked Wilson, whose curiosity had overcome his pain. "And many other things." "Just think, Wilson, I have found the mysterious link which unites the different adventures in which the blonde lady played a part. Why did Lupin select those 3 houses for the scenes of his exploits?" "Yes, why?" "Because those 3 houses were built by the same architect." "That was an easy problem, eh?" "Of course. But who would have thought of it?" "No one but you. And who, except I, knows that the same architect, by the use of analogous plans, has rendered it possible for a person to execute 3 distinct acts which, though miraculous in appearance, are, in reality, quite simple and easy? That was a stroke of good luck. And it was time, dear boy, as I was becoming very impatient. You know, this is our 4th day. Out of 10. Oh, after this, Sholmes was excited, delighted, and gayer than usual. "And when I think that these rascals might have attacked me in the street and broken my arm just as they did yours. Isn't that so, Wilson?" Wilson simply shivered at the horrible thought. Sholmes continued, "We must profit by the lesson. I can see, Wilson, that we were wrong to try and fight Lupin in the open and leave ourselves exposed to his attacks. I can see it, and feel it too in my broken arm," said Wilson. "You have one consolation, Wilson, that is, that I escaped. Now, I must be doubly cautious. In an open fight he will defeat me. But if I can work in the dark, unseen by him, I have the advantage, no matter how strong his forces may be. Ganimard might be of some assistance." "Never! On the day that I can truly say, Arsène Lupin is there, I show you the quarry and how to catch it. I shall go and see Ganimard at one of the 2 addresses that he gave me, his residence in the Rue Pergolese, or at the Suisse Tavern in the Place du Châtelet. But, until that time, I shall work alone. He approached the bed, placed his hand on Wilson's shoulder, on the sore one, of course, and said to him, "Take care of yourself, old fellow. Henceforth your role will be to keep 2 or 3 of Arsène Lupin's men busy watching here in vain for my return to inquire about your health. It is a secret mission for you, eh? Yes, and I shall do my best to fulfill it conscientiously." "Then you do not expect to come here any more?" "What for?" asked Sholmes. "I don't know, of course. I'm getting on as well as possible. But, Herlock, do me a last service. Give me a drink." "A drink?" "Yes. I am dying of thirst, and with my fever, to be sure, directly." He made a pretense of getting some water, perceived a package of tobacco, lighted his pipe, and then, as if he had not heard his friend's request, he went away, whilst Wilson uttered a mute prayer for the inaccessible water. Monsieur Destange. The servant eyed from head to foot the person to whom he had opened the door of the house, the magnificent house that stood at the corner of the Place Malesherbes and the Rue Montchanin, and at the sight of the man with gray hairs, badly shaved, dressed in a shabby black coat, with a body as ill-formed and ungracious as his face, he replied with the disdain which he thought the occasion warranted, "Monsieur Destange may or may not be at home. That depends. Has Monsieur a card?" Monsieur did not have a card, but he had a letter of introduction, and, after the servant had taken the letter to Mom, Destange, he was conducted into the presence of that gentleman who was sitting in a large circular room or rotunda which occupied one of the wings of the house. It was a library, and contained a profusion of books and architectural drawings. When the stranger entered, the architect said to him, "You are Monsieur Stickman?" "Yes, monsieur. My secretary tells me that he is ill, and has sent you to continue the general catalogue of the books which he commenced under my direction, and more particularly the catalogue of German books." "Are you familiar with that kind of work?" "Yes, monsieur, quite so," he replied with a strong German accent. Under those circumstances the bargain was soon concluded, and morosiers. Destange commenced work with his new secretary. Herlock Sholmes had gained access to the house. In order to escape the vigilance of Arsène Lupin and gain admittance to the house occupied by Lucien Destange and his daughter Clotilde, the famous detective had been compelled to resort to a number of stratagems and, under a variety of names, to ingratiate himself into the good graces and confidence of a number of persons. In short, to live, during 48 hours, a most complicated life. During that time he had acquired the following information. Mon. Destange, having retired from active business on account of his failing health, now lived amongst the many books he had accumulated on the subject of architecture. He derived infinite pleasure in viewing and handling those dusty old volumes. His daughter Clotilde was considered eccentric. She passed her time in another part of the house and never went out. "Of course," Sholmes said to himself, as he wrote in a register the titles of the books which Destange dictated to him. "All that is vague and incomplete, but it is quite a long step in advance. I shall surely solve one of these absorbing problems. Is Destange associated with Arsène Lupin? Does he continue to see him? Are the papers relating to the construction of the 3 houses still in existence? Will those papers not furnish me with the location of other houses of similar construction which Arsène Lupin and his associates will plunder in the future? Monsieur Destange, an accomplice of Arsène Lupin, that venerable man, an officer of the Legion of Honor, working in league with a burglar. Such an idea was absurd. Besides, if we concede that such a complicity exists, how could Destange 30 years ago have possibly foreseen the thefts of Arsène Lupin, who was then an infant? No matter. The Englishman was implacable, with his marvelous scent, and that instinct which never fails him. He felt that he was in the heart of some strange mystery. Ever since he first entered the house he had been under the influence of that impression, and yet he could not define the grounds on which he based his suspicions. Up to the morning of the second day he had not made any significant discovery. At 2 o'clock of that day he saw Clotilde Destange for the first time. She came to the library in search of a book. She was about 30 years of age, a brunette, slow and silent in her movements, with features imbued with that expression of indifference which is characteristic of people who live a secluded life. She exchanged a few words with her father and then retired, without even looking at Sholmes. The afternoon dragged along monotonously. At 5 o'clock, Destange announced his intention to go out. Sholmes was alone on the circular gallery that was constructed about 10 feet above the floor of the rotunda. It was almost dark. He was on the point of going out, when he heard a slight sound and, at the same time, experienced the feeling that there was someone in the room. Several minutes passed before he saw or heard anything more. Then he shuddered. A shadowy form emerged from the gloom, quite close to him, upon the balcony. It seemed incredible. How long had this mysterious visitor been there? Whence did he come? The strange man descended the steps and went directly to a large oaken cupboard. Sholmes was a keen observer of the man's movements. He watched him searching amongst the papers with which the cupboard was filled. What was he looking for? Then the door opened, and Mademoiselle Destange entered, speaking to someone who was following her. "So you have decided not to go out, father? Then I will make a light. 1 second. Do not move." The strange man closed the cupboard and hid in the embrasure of a large window, drawing the curtains together. Did Mademoiselle Destange not see him? Did she not hear him? Calmly she turned on the electric lights. She and her father sat down close to each other. She opened a book she had brought with her and commenced to read. After the lapse of a few minutes, she said, "Your secretary has gone." "Yes, I don't see him." "Do you like him as well as you did at first?" she asked, as if she were not aware of the illness of the real secretary and his replacement by Stickman. "Oh, yes." Monsieur Destange's head bobbed from one side to the other. He was asleep. The girl resumed her reading. A moment later, one of the window curtains was pushed back, and the strange man emerged and glided along the wall toward the door, which obliged him to pass behind Destange, but in front of Clotilde, and brought him into the light so that Herlock Sholmes obtained a good view of the man's face. It was Arsène Lupin. The Englishman was delighted. His forecast was verified. He had penetrated to the very heart of the mystery, and found Arsène Lupin to be the moving spirit in it. Clotilde had not yet displayed any knowledge of his presence, although it was quite improbable that any movement of the intruder had escaped her notice. Lupin had almost reached the door, and, in fact, his hand was already seeking the doorknob, when his coat brushed against a small table and knocked something to the floor. Monsieur Destange awoke with a start. Arsène Lupin was already standing in front of him, hat in hand, smiling. "Maxime Bermond!" exclaimed Destange joyfully. "My dear Maxime, what lucky chance brings you here?" "The wish to see you and Mademoiselle Destange." "When did you return from your journey?" "Yesterday." "You must stay to dinner." "No, thank you. I'm sorry, but I have an appointment to dine with some friends at a restaurant." "Come, tomorrow then, Clotilde. You must urge him to come tomorrow." "Ah, my dear Maxime, I thought of you many times during your absence." "Really?" "Yes. I went through all my old papers in that cupboard, and found our last statement of account." "What account?" "Relating to the Avenue Henri Martin." "Ah, do you keep such papers? What for?" Then the three of them left the room, and continued their conversation in a small parlor which adjoined the library. "Is it Lupin?" Sholmes asked himself, in a sudden access of doubt. Certainly, from all appearances, it was he, and yet it was also someone else who resembled Arsène Lupin in certain respects, and who still maintained his own individuality, features, and color of hair. Sholmes could hear Lupin's voice in the adjoining room. He was relating some stories at which Destange laughed heartily, and which even brought a smile to the lips of the melancholy Clotilde. And each of those smiles appeared to be the reward which Arsène Lupin was seeking, and which he was delighted to have secured. His success caused him to redouble his efforts, and, insensibly, at the sound of that clear and happy voice, Clotilde's face brightened and lost that cold and listless expression which usually pervaded it. "They love each other," thought Sholmes. But what the deuce can there be in common between Clotilde Destange and Maxime Bermond? Does she know that Maxime is none other than Arsène Lupin? Until 7 o'clock, Sholmes was an anxious listener, seeking to profit by the conversation. Then, with infinite precaution, he descended from the gallery, crept along the side of the room to the door in such a manner that the people in the adjoining room did not see him. When he reached the street, Sholmes satisfied himself that there was neither an automobile nor a cab waiting there. Then he slowly limped along the boulevard Malesherbes. He turned into an adjacent street, donned the overcoat which he had carried on his arm, altered the shape of his hat, assumed an upright carriage, and thus transformed, returned to a place whence he could watch the door of Mole Destange's house. In a few minutes Arsène Lupin came out, and proceeded to walk toward the center of Paris, by way of the Rues de Constantinople and London. Herlock Sholmes followed at a distance of 100 paces. Exciting moments for the Englishman! He sniffed the air eagerly, like a hound following a fresh scent. It seemed to him a delightful thing thus to follow his adversary. It was no longer Herlock Sholmes who was being watched, but Arsène Lupin, the invisible Arsène Lupin. He held him, so to speak, within the grasp of his eye, by an imperceptible bond that nothing could break, and he was pleased to think that the quarry belonged to him. But he soon observed a suspicious circumstance. In the intervening space between him and Arsène Lupin, he noticed several people traveling in the same direction, particularly 2 husky fellows in slouch hats on the left side of the street, and 2 others on the right, wearing caps and smoking cigarettes. Of course, their presence in that vicinity may have been the result of chance, but Sholmes was more astonished when he observed that the 4 men stopped when Lupin entered a tobacco shop, and still more surprised when the 4 men started again after Lupin emerged from the shop, each keeping to his own side of the street. "Curse it," muttered Sholmes, "he is being followed." He was annoyed at the idea that others were on the trail of Arsène Lupin, that someone might deprive him, not of the glory, he cared little for that, but of the immense pleasure of capturing, single-handed, the most formidable enemy he had ever met, and he felt that he was not mistaken. The men presented to Sholmes' experienced eye the appearance and manner of those who, while regulating their gait to that of another, wish to present a careless and natural air. "Is this some of Ganimard's work?" muttered Sholmes. "Is he playing me false?" He felt inclined to speak to one of the men with a view of acting in concert with him. But as they were now approaching the boulevard, the crowd was becoming denser, and he was afraid he might lose sight of Lupin. So he quickened his pace and turned into the boulevard, just in time to see Lupin ascending the steps of the Hungarian restaurant at the corner of the Rue du Helder. The door of the restaurant was open, so that Sholmes, while sitting on a bench on the other side of the boulevard, could see Lupin take a seat at a table, luxuriously appointed and decorated with flowers, at which 3 gentlemen and 2 ladies of elegant appearance were already seated, and who extended to Lupin a hearty greeting. Sholmes now looked about for the 4 men and perceived them amongst a crowd of people who were listening to a gypsy orchestra that was playing in a neighboring café. It was a curious thing that they were paying no attention to Arsène Lupin, but seemed to be friendly with the people around them. One of them took a cigarette from his pocket and approached a gentleman who wore a frock coat and silk hat. The gentleman offered the other his cigar for a light, and Sholmes had the impression that they talked to each other much longer than the occasion demanded. Finally, the gentleman approached the Hungarian restaurant, entered, and looked around. When he caught sight of Lupin, he advanced and spoke to him for a moment, then took a seat at an adjoining table. Sholmes now recognized this gentleman as the horseman who had tried to run him down in the Avenue Henri Martin. Then Sholmes understood that these men were not tracking Arsène Lupin. They were a part of his band. They were watching over his safety. They were his bodyguard, his satellites, his vigilant escort. Wherever danger threatened Lupin, these confederates were at hand to avert it, ready to defend him. The 4 men were accomplices. The gentleman in the frock coat was an accomplice. These facts furnished the Englishman with food for reflection. Would he ever succeed in capturing that inaccessible individual? What unlimited power was possessed by such an organization, directed by such a chief? He tore a leaf from his notebook, wrote a few lines in pencil, which he placed in an envelope, and said to a boy about 15 years of age, who was sitting on the bench beside him, "Here, my boy, take a carriage and deliver this letter to the cashier of the Suisse Tavern, Place du Châtelet. Be quick!" He gave him a 5-franc piece. The boy disappeared. A half-hour passed away. The crowd had grown larger, and Sholmes perceived only at intervals the accomplices of Arsène Lupin. Then someone brushed against him and whispered in his ear, "Well, what is it, Monsieur Sholmes?" "Ah, it is you, Ganimard." "Yes, I received your note at the tavern. What's the matter?" "He is there." "What do you mean?" "There, in the restaurant. Lean to the right. Do you see him now?" "No." "He is pouring a glass of champagne for the lady." "That is not Lupin." "Yes, it is." "But I tell you—" "Ah." "Yet it may be." "It looks a great deal like him," said Ganimard naively. "And the others? Accomplices?" "No. The lady sitting beside him is Lady Cliveden. The other is the Duchess de Cleath. The gentleman sitting opposite Lupin is the Spanish ambassador to London." Ganimard took a step forward. Sholmes retained him. "Be prudent. You are alone." "So is he." "No. He has a number of men on the boulevard mounting guard. And inside the restaurant, that gentleman and I, when I take Arsène Lupin by the collar and announce his name, I shall have the entire room on my side and all the waiters. I should prefer to have a few policemen. But, Monsieur Sholmes, we have no choice. We must catch him when we can." He was right. Sholmes knew it. It was better to take advantage of the opportunity and make the attempt. Sholmes simply gave this advice to Ganimard: "Conceal your identity as long as possible." Sholmes glided behind a newspaper kiosk, whence he could still watch Lupin, who was leaning toward Lady Cliveden, talking and smiling. Ganimard crossed the street, hands in his pockets, as if he were going down the boulevard, but when he reached the opposite sidewalk he turned quickly and bounded up the steps of the restaurant. There was a shrill whistle. Ganimard ran against the head waiter, who had suddenly planted himself in the doorway and now pushed Ganimard back with a show of indignation, as if he were an intruder whose presence would bring disgrace upon the restaurant. Ganimard was surprised. At the same moment the gentleman in the frock-coat came out. He took the part of the detective and entered into an exciting argument with the waiter. Both of them hung on to Ganimard, one pushing him in, the other pushing him out in such a manner that, despite all his efforts and despite his furious protestations, the unfortunate detective soon found himself on the sidewalk. The struggling men were surrounded by a crowd. Two policemen, attracted by the noise, tried to force their way through the crowd, but encountered a mysterious resistance and could make no headway through the opposing backs and pressing shoulders of the mob. But suddenly, as if by magic, the crowd parted, and the passage to the restaurant was clear. The head waiter, recognizing his mistake, was profuse in his apologies. The gentleman in the frock coat ceased his efforts on behalf of the detective. The crowd dispersed, the policeman passed on, and Ganimard hastened to the table at which the 6 guests were sitting. But now there were only 5. He looked around. The only exit was the door. "The person who is sitting here," he cried to the 5 astonished guests. "Where is he?" "Monsieur Destro?" "No, Arsène Lupin." A waiter approached and said, "The gentleman went upstairs." Ganimard rushed up in the hope of finding him. The upper floor of the restaurant contained private dining rooms and had a private stairway leading to the boulevard. "No use looking for him now," muttered Ganimard. "He is far away by this time." He was not far away, 200 yards at most, in the Madeleine Bastille omnibus, which was rolling along very peacefully with its 3 horses across the Place de l'Opéra toward the Boulevard des Capucines. 2 sturdy fellows were talking together on the platform. On the roof of the omnibus near the stairs, an old fellow was sleeping. It was Herlock Sholmes. With bobbing head, rocked by the movement of the vehicle, the Englishman said to himself, "If Wilson could see me now, how proud he would be of his collaborator. Bah!" It was easy to foresee that the game was lost as soon as the man whistled. Nothing could be done but watch the exits and see that our man did not escape. Really, Lupin makes life exciting and interesting. At the terminal point, Herlock Sholmes, by leaning over, saw Arsène Lupin leaving the omnibus, and as he passed in front of the men who formed his bodyguard, Sholmes heard him say, "À l'étoile." "À l'étoile, exactly, a rendezvous. I shall be there," thought Sholmes. "I will follow the two men." Lupin took an automobile, but the men walked the entire distance, followed by Sholmes. They stopped at a narrow house, number 40 Rue Chalgrin, and rang the bell. Sholmes took his position in the shadow of a doorway, whence he could watch the house in question. A man opened one of the windows of the ground floor and closed the shutters, but the shutters did not reach to the top of the window. The impost was clear. At the end of 10 minutes, a gentleman rang at the same door, and a few minutes later, another man came. A short time afterward, an automobile stopped in front of the house, bringing 2 passengers, Arsène Lupin and a lady concealed beneath a large cloak and a thick veil. "The blonde lady, no doubt," said Sholmes to himself, as the automobile drove away. Herlock Sholmes now approached the house, climbed to the window ledge, and, by standing on tiptoe, he was able to see through the window above the shutters. What did he see? Arsène Lupin, leaning against the mantel, was speaking with considerable animation. The others were grouped around him, listening to him attentively. Amongst them, Sholmes easily recognized the gentleman in the frock coat, and he thought one of the other men resembled the head waiter of the restaurant. As to the blonde lady, she was seated in an armchair with her back to the window. "They are holding a consultation," thought Sholmes. "They are worried over the incident at the restaurant and are holding a council of war. Ah, what a master stroke it would be to capture all of them at one fell stroke." One of them, having moved toward the door, Sholmes leaped to the ground and concealed himself in the shadow. The gentleman in the frock coat and the head waiter left the house. A moment later a light appeared at the windows of the first floor, but the shutters were closed immediately, and the upper part of the house was dark as well as the lower. "Lupin and the woman are on the ground floor. The 2 confederates live on the upper floor," said Sholmes. Sholmes remained there the greater part of the night, fearing that if he went away, Arsène Lupin might leave during his absence. At 4 o'clock, seeing 2 policemen at the end of the street, he approached them, explained the situation, and left them to watch the house. He went to Ganimard's residence in the Rue Pergolese and wakened him. "I have him yet," said Sholmes. "Arsène Lupin?" "Yes. If you haven't got any better hold on him than you had a while ago, I might as well go back to bed. But we may as well go to the station house." They went to the police station in the Rue Mesnil, and from there to the residence of the commissary, Mont de Cointre. Then, accompanied by half a dozen policemen, they went to the Rue Chalgrin. "Anything new?" asked Sholmes, addressing the 2 policemen. "Nothing." It was just breaking day, when after taking necessary measures to prevent escape, the commissary rang the bell and commenced to question the concierge. The woman was greatly frightened at this early morning invasion, and she trembled as she replied that there were no tenants on the ground floor. "What? Not a tenant?" exclaimed Ganimard. "No, but on the first floor there are 2 men named Leroux. They have furnished the apartment on the ground floor for some country relations. A gentleman and lady." "Yes, who came here last night." "Perhaps, but I don't know. I was asleep. But I don't think so, for the key is here. They did not ask for it." With that key, the commissary opened the door of the ground floor apartment. It comprised only 2 rooms, and they were empty. "Impossible!" exclaimed Sholmes. "I saw both of them in this room." "I don't doubt your word," said the commissary, "but they are not here now." "Let us go to the first floor. They must be there." "The first floor is occupied by 2 men named Leroux." "We will examine the Messieurs Leroux." They all ascended the stairs, and the commissary rang. At the second ring, a man opened the door. He was in his shirt sleeves. Sholmes recognized him as one of Lupin's bodyguard. The man assumed a furious air. What do you mean by making such a row at this hour of the morning? Waking people up. But he stopped suddenly, astounded. God forgive me! Really, gentlemen? I didn't notice who it was. Why, it is Monsieur de Cointre, and you, Monsieur Ganimard. What can I do for you? Ganimard burst into an uncontrollable fit of laughter, which caused him to bend double and turn black in the face. Ah, it is you, Leroux, he stammered. Oh, this is too funny. Leroux, an accomplice of Arsène Lupin. Oh, I shall die. And your brother Leroux, where is he? Edmond, called the man, it is Ganimard who has come to visit us. Another man appeared, and, at sight of him, Ganimard's mirth redoubled. Oh, we had no idea of this. Ah, my friends, you are in a bad fix now. Who would have ever suspected it? Turning to Sholmes, Ganimard introduced the man. Victor Leroux, a detective from our office, one of the best men in the Iron Brigade. Edmond Leroux, chief clerk in the anthropometric service. Chapter. Versus an abduction. Herlock Sholmes said nothing. To protest? To accuse the two men? That would be useless. In the absence of evidence which he did not possess and had no time to seek, no one would believe him. Moreover, he was stifled with rage, but would not display his feelings before the triumphant Ganimard. So he bowed respectfully to the brothers Leroux, guardians of society, and retired. In the vestibule he turned toward a low door, which looked like the entrance to a cellar, and picked up a small red stone. It was a garnet. When he reached the street he turned and read on the front of the house this inscription, Lucien Destange, architect, 1877. The adjoining house, number 42, bore the same inscription. Always the double passage, numbers 40 and 42, have a secret means of communication. Why didn't I think of that? I should have remained with the two policemen. He met the policemen near the corner and said to them, "Two people came out of house number 42 during my absence, didn't they?" "Yes, a gentleman and lady." Ganimard approached. Sholmes took his arm, and as they walked down the street he said, "Monsieur Ganimard, you have had a good laugh and will no doubt forgive me for the trouble I have caused you." "Oh, there's no harm done, but it was a good joke." "I admit that. But the best jokes have only a short life, and this one can't last much longer." "I hope not. This is now the 7th day, and I can remain only 3 days more. Then I must return to London." "Oh." "I wish to ask you to be in readiness, as I may call on you at any hour on Tuesday or Wednesday night." "For an expedition of the same kind as we had tonight?" "Yes, monsieur, the very same." "With what result?" "The capture of Arsène Lupin," replied Sholmes. "Do you think so?" "I swear it on my honor, monsieur." Sholmes bade Ganimard goodbye and went to the nearest hotel for a few hours' sleep, after which, refreshed, and with renewed confidence in himself, he returned to the Rue Chalgrin, slipped 2 louis into the hand of the concierge, assured himself that the brothers Leroux had gone out, learned that the house belonged to a Monsieur Harmingeat, and, provided with a candle, descended to the cellar through the low door near which he had found the garnet. At the bottom of the stairs he found another exactly like it. "I am not mistaken," he thought. "This is the means of communication. Let me see if my skeleton key will open the cellar reserved for the tenant of the ground floor. Yes, it will. Now, I will examine those cases of wine. Oh, here are some places where the dust has been cleared away, and some footprints on the ground." A slight noise caused him to listen attentively. Quickly he pushed the door shut, blew out his candle, and hid behind a pile of empty wine cases. After a few seconds he noticed that a portion of the wall swung on a pivot. The light of a lantern was thrown into the cellar, an arm appeared, then a man entered. He was bent over, as if he were searching for something. He felt in the dust with his fingers, and several times he threw something into a cardboard box that he carried in his left hand. Afterward he obliterated the traces of his footsteps, as well as the footprints left by Lupin and the blonde lady, and he was about to leave the cellar by the same way as he had entered, when he uttered a harsh cry and fell to the ground. Sholmes had leaped upon him. It was the work of a moment, and in the simplest manner in the world the man found himself stretched on the ground, bound and handcuffed. The Englishman leaned over him and said, "Have you anything to say, to tell what you know?" The man replied by such an ironical smile that Sholmes realized the futility of questioning him. So he contented himself by exploring the pockets of his captive. But he found only a bunch of keys, a handkerchief, and the small cardboard box which contained a dozen garnets similar to those which Sholmes had found. Then what was he to do with the man? Wait until his friends came to his help and deliver all of them to the police? What good would that do? What advantage would that give him over Lupin? He hesitated, but an examination of the box decided the question. The box bore this name and address: Leonard, jeweler, Rue de la Paix. He resolved to abandon the man to his fate. He locked the cellar and left the house. At a branch post office, he sent a telegram to Monsieur Destange, saying that he could not come that day. Then he went to see the jeweler, and, handing him the garnets, said, "Madame sent me with these stones. She wishes to have them reset." Sholmes had struck the right key. The jeweler replied, "Certainly. The lady telephoned to me. She said she would be here today." Sholmes established himself on the sidewalk to wait for the lady, but it was 5 o'clock when he saw a heavily veiled lady approach and enter the store. Through the window he saw her place on the counter a piece of antique jewelry set with garnets. She went away almost immediately, walking quickly, and passed through streets that were unknown to the Englishman. As it was now almost dark, he walked close behind her and followed her into a 5-story house of double flats and, therefore, occupied by numerous tenants. At the second floor she stopped and entered. 2 minutes later the Englishman commenced to try the keys on the bunch he had taken from the man in the Rue Chalgrin. The 4th key fitted the lock. Notwithstanding the darkness of the rooms, he perceived that they were absolutely empty, as if unoccupied, and the various doors were standing open so that he could see all the apartments. At the end of a corridor he perceived a ray of light, and, by approaching on tiptoe and looking through the glass door, he saw the veiled lady who had removed her hat and dress, and was now wearing a velvet dressing gown. The discarded garments were lying on the only chair in the room, and a lighted lamp stood on the mantel. Then he saw her approach the fireplace and press what appeared to be the button of an electric bell. Immediately the panel to the right of the fireplace moved and slowly glided behind the adjoining panel, thus disclosing an opening large enough for a person to pass through. The lady disappeared through this opening, taking the lamp with her. The operation was a very simple one. Sholmes adopted it and followed the lady. He found himself in total darkness, and immediately he felt his face brushed by some soft articles. He lighted a match and found that he was in a very small room completely filled with cloaks and dresses suspended on hangers. He picked his way through until he reached a door that was draped with a portiere. He peeped through and, behold, the blonde lady was there, under his eyes and almost within reach of his hand. She extinguished the lamp and turned on the electric lights. Then, for the first time, Herlock Sholmes obtained a good look at her face. He was amazed. The woman, whom he had overtaken after so much trouble and after so many tricks and maneuvers, was none other than Clotilde Destange. Clotilde Destange, the assassin of the Baron d'Autrec and the thief who stole the blue diamond. Clotilde Destange, the mysterious friend of Arsène Lupin. And the blonde lady. Yes, I am only a stupid ass, thought Herlock Sholmes at that moment. Because Lupin's friend was a blonde and Clotilde's a brunette, I never dreamed that they were the same person. But how could the blonde lady remain a blonde after the murder of the Baron and the theft of the diamond? Sholmes could see a portion of the room. It was a boudoir, furnished with the most delightful luxury and exquisite taste. and adorned with beautiful tapestries and costly ornaments. A mahogany couch, upholstered in silk, was located on the side of the room opposite the door at which Sholmes was standing. Clotilde was sitting on this couch, motionless, her face covered by her hands. Then he perceived that she was weeping. Great tears rolled down her pale cheeks and fell, drop by drop, on the velvet corsage. The tears came thick and fast, as if their source were inexhaustible. A door silently opened behind her, and Arsène Lupin entered. He looked at her for a long time without making his presence known. Then he approached her, knelt at her feet, pressed her head to his breast, folded her in his arms, and his actions indicated an infinite measure of love and sympathy. For a time not a word was uttered, but her tears became less abundant. "I was so anxious to make you happy," he murmured. "I am happy." "No, you are crying. Your tears break my heart, Clotilde." The caressing and sympathetic tone of his voice soothed her, and she listened to him with an eager desire for hope and happiness. Her features were softened by a smile, and yet how sad a smile! He continued to speak in a tone of tender entreaty. "You should not be unhappy, Clotilde. You have no cause to be." She displayed her delicate white hands and said solemnly, "Yes, Maxime, so long as I see those hands, I shall be sad." "Why?" "They are stained with blood." "Hush! Do not think of that," exclaimed Lupin. "The dead is past and gone. Do not resurrect it." And he kissed the long, delicate hand, while she regarded him with a brighter smile, as if each kiss effaced a portion of that dreadful memory. "You must love me, Maxime. You must, because no woman will ever love you as I do. For your sake I have done many things, not at your order or request, but in obedience to your secret desires. I have done things at which my will and conscience revolted, but there was some unknown power that I could not resist. What I did involuntarily, mechanically, because it helped you, because you wished it, and I am ready to do it again tomorrow, and always." "Ah, Clotilde," he said bitterly, "why did I draw you into my adventurous life? I should have remained the Maxime Bermond that you loved 5 years ago, and not have let you know the other man that I am." She replied in a low voice, "I love the other man also, and I have nothing to regret." "Yes, you regret your past life, the free and happy life you once enjoyed." "I have no regrets when you are here," she said passionately. "All faults and crimes disappear when I see you. When you are away, I may suffer and weep and be horrified at what I have done, but when you come it is all forgotten. Your love wipes it all away, and I am happy again. But you must love me. I do not love you on compulsion, Clotilde. I love you simply because I love you." "Are you sure of it?" "I am just as sure of my own love as I am of yours. Only my life is a very active and exciting one, and I cannot spend as much time with you as I would like. Just now." "What is it? Some new danger? Tell me." "Oh, nothing serious. Only what?" she asked. "Well, he is on our track." "Who? Herlock Sholmes?" "Yes. It was he who dragged Ganimard into that affair at the Hungarian restaurant. It was he who instructed the 2 policemen to watch the house in the Rue Chalgrin. I have proof of it. Ganimard searched the house this morning, and Sholmes was with him. Besides... What? Well, there is another thing. One of our men is missing." "Who?" "Jeanniot." "The concierge?" "Yes." "Why, I sent him to the Rue Chalgrin this morning to pick up the garnets that fell out of my brooch." "There is no doubt, then, that Sholmes caught him." "No. The garnets were delivered to the jeweler in the Rue de la Paix. Then what has become of him? Oh, Maxime, I am afraid. There is nothing to be afraid of, but I confess the situation is very serious. What does he know? Where does he hide himself? His isolation is his strong card. I cannot reach him. What are you going to do? Act with extreme prudence, Clotilde. Some time ago I decided to change my residence to a safer place, and Sholmes' appearance on the scene has prompted me to do so at once. When a man like that is on your track, you must be prepared for the worst. Well, I am making my preparations. Day after tomorrow, Wednesday, I shall move. At noon it will be finished. At 2 o'clock, I shall leave the place, after removing the last trace of our residence there, which will be no small matter. Until then, we must not see each other, and no one must see you, Clotilde. Do not go out. I have no fear for myself, but I have for you. That Englishman cannot possibly reach me. I am not so sure of that. He is a dangerous man. Yesterday I came here to search the cupboard that contains all of Monsieur Destange's old papers and records. There is danger there. There is danger everywhere. I feel that he is watching us, that he is drawing his net around us closer and closer. It is one of those intuitions which never deceive me. In that case, Maxime, go, and think no more of my tears. I shall be brave, and wait patiently until the danger is past. Adieu, Maxime. They held one another for some time in a last fond embrace, and it was she that gently pushed him outside. Sholmes could hear the sound of their voices in the distance. Emboldened by the necessities of the situation and the urgent need of bringing his investigation to a speedy termination, Sholmes proceeded to make an examination of the house in which he now found himself. He passed through Clotilde's boudoir into a corridor, at the end of which there was a stairway leading to the lower floor. He was about to descend this stairway when he heard voices below, which caused him to change his route. He followed the corridor, which was a circular one, and discovered another stairway, which he descended and found himself amidst surroundings that bore a familiar appearance. He passed through a door that stood partly open and entered a large circular room. It was Monsieur Destange's library. "Ah, splendid!" he exclaimed. "Now I understand everything." The boudoir of Mademoiselle Clotilde, the blonde lady, communicates with a room in the adjoining house, and that house does not front on the Place Malesherbes, but upon an adjacent street, the Rue Montchanin, if I remember the name correctly. And I now understand how Clotilde Destange can meet her lover and at the same time create the impression that she never leaves the house. And I understand also how Arsène Lupin was enabled to make his mysterious entrance to the gallery last night. Ah, there must be another connection between the library and the adjoining room, one more house full of ways that are dark. And no doubt Lucien Destange was the architect as usual. I should take advantage of this opportunity to examine the contents of the cupboard and perhaps learn the location of other houses with secret passages constructed by Monsieur Destange. Sholmes ascended to the gallery and concealed himself behind some draperies, where he remained until late in the evening. At last a servant came and turned off the electric lights. An hour later the Englishman, by the light of his lantern, made his way to the cupboard. As he had surmised, it contained the architect's old papers, plans, specifications, and books of account. It also contained a series of registers, arranged according to date, and Sholmes, having selected those of the most recent dates, searched in the indexes for the name Harmingeat. He found it in one of the registers with a reference to page 63. Turning to that page, he read, Harmingeat, 40 Rue Chalgrin. This was followed by a detailed account of the work done in and about the installation of a furnace in the house. And in the margin of the book someone had written these words, "See account M.B." "Ah, I thought so," said Sholmes. "The account M.B. is the one I want. I shall learn from it the actual residence of Monsieur Lupin." It was morning before he found that important account. It comprised 16 pages, one of which was a copy of the page on which was described the work done for Mon, Harmingeat of the Rue Chalgrin. Another page described the work performed for Mon Vatinel as owner of the house at number 25 Rue Clapeyron. Another page was reserved for the Baron d'Autrec, 134th Avenue, Henri Martin. Another was devoted to the Château de Crozon, and the 11 other pages to various owners of houses in Paris. Sholmes made a list of those 11 names and addresses, after which he returned the books to their proper places, opened a window, jumped out onto the deserted street, and closed the shutters behind him. When he reached his room at the hotel, he lighted his pipe with all the solemnity with which he was wont to characterize that act, and amidst clouds of smoke he studied the deductions that might be drawn from the account of Monsieur B., or rather from the account of Maxime Bermond alias Arsène Lupin. At 8 o'clock he sent the following message to Ganimard. I expect to pass through the Rue Pergolese this forenoon, and will inform you of a person whose arrest is of the highest importance. In any event, be at home tonight and tomorrow until noon, and have at least 30 men at your service. Then he engaged an automobile at the stand on the boulevard, choosing one whose chauffeur looked good-natured but dull-witted, and instructed him to drive to the Place Malesherbes, where he stopped him about 100 feet from Monsieur Destange's house. My boy, close your carriage, he said to the chauffeur, turn up the collar of your coat, for the wind is cold, and wait patiently. At the end of an hour and a half, crank up your machine. When I return, we will go to the Rue Pergolese. As he was ascending the steps leading to the door, a doubt entered his mind. Was it not a mistake on his part to be spending his time on the affairs of the blonde lady, while Arsène Lupin was preparing to move? Would he not be better engaged in trying to find the abode of his adversary amongst the 11 houses on his list? Ah, he exclaimed, when the blonde lady becomes my prisoner, I shall be master of the situation. And he rang the bell. Monsieur Destange was already in the library. They had been working only a few minutes, when Clotilde entered, bade her father good morning, entered the adjoining parlor, and sat down to write. From his place, Sholmes could see her leaning over the table, and from time to time absorbed in deep meditation. After a short time, he picked up a book and said to Monsieur Destange, "Here is a book that Mademoiselle Destange asked me to bring to her when I found it." He went into the little parlor, stood before Clotilde in such a manner that her father could not see her, and said, "I am Monsieur Stickmann, your father's new secretary." "Ah," said Clotilde without moving, "my father has changed his secretary? I didn't know it." "Yes, mademoiselle, and I desire to speak with you." "Kindly take a seat, monsieur. I have finished." She added a few words to her letter, signed it, enclosed it in the envelope, sealed it, pushed her writing material away, rang the telephone, got in communication with her dressmaker, asked the latter to hasten the completion of a traveling dress, as she required it at once, and then, turning to Sholmes, she said, "I am at your service, monsieur, but do you wish to speak before my father? Would not that be better?" "No, mademoiselle, and I beg of you, do not raise your voice. It is better that Monsieur Destange should not hear us." "For whose sake is it better?" "Yours, mademoiselle. I cannot agree to hold any conversation with you that my father may not hear." "But you must agree to this. It is imperative." Both of them arose, eye to eye. She said, "Speak, monsieur." Still standing, he commenced. "You will be so good as to pardon me if I am mistaken on certain points of secondary importance. I will guarantee, however, the general accuracy of my statements." "Can we not dispense with these preliminaries, monsieur? Or are they necessary?" Sholmes felt the young woman was on her guard, so he replied, "Very well, I will come to the point. 5 years ago, your father made the acquaintance of a certain young man called Maxime Bermond, who was introduced as a contractor or an architect. I am not sure which it was, but it was one or the other. Monsieur Destange took a liking to the young man, and as the state of his health compelled him to retire from active business, he entrusted to Monsieur Bermond the execution of certain orders he had received from some of his old customers, and which seemed to come within the scope of Monsieur Bermond's ability." Herlock Sholmes stopped. It seemed to him that the girl's pallor had increased, yet There was not the slightest tremor in her voice when she said, "I know nothing about the circumstances to which you refer, monsieur, and I do not see in what way they can interest me. In this way, mademoiselle. You know as well as I that Maxime Bermond is also known by the name of Arsène Lupin." She laughed and said, "Nonsense! Arsène Lupin? Maxime Bermond is Arsène Lupin? Oh, no, it isn't possible. I have the honor to inform you of that fact, and since you refuse to understand my meaning, I will add that Arsène Lupin has found in this house a friend, more than a friend, an accomplice, blindly and passionately devoted to him, without emotion, or at least with so little emotion that Sholmes was astonished at her self-control. She declared, "I do not understand your object, monsieur, and I do not care to, but I command you to say no more and leave this house." "I have no intention of forcing my presence on you," replied Sholmes with equal sang-froid, "but I shall not leave this house alone." "And who will accompany you, monsieur?" "You will." "I?" "Yes, mademoiselle, we will leave this house together, and you will follow me without one word of protest." The strange feature of the foregoing interview was the absolute coolness of the two adversaries. It bore no resemblance to an implacable duel between two powerful wills, but, judging solely from their attitude and the tone of their voices, an onlooker would have supposed their conversation to be nothing more serious than a courteous argument over some impersonal subject. Clotilde resumed her seat without deigning to reply to the last remark of Herlock Sholmes, except by a shrug of her shoulders. Sholmes looked at his watch and said, "It is 10:30. We will leave here in 5 minutes. Perhaps. If not, I shall go to Monsieur Destange and tell him—" "What?" "The truth. I will tell him of the vicious life of Maxime Bermond, and I will tell him of the double life of his accomplice." "Of his accomplice?" "Yes, of the woman known as the Blonde Lady, of the woman who was blonde." "What proofs will you give him?" "I will take him to the Rue Chalgrin and show him the secret passage made by Arsène Lupin's workmen, while doing the work of which he had the control, between the houses numbered 40 and 42, the passage which you and he used 2 nights ago." "Well, I will then take Monsieur Destange to the house of Monsieur Detinan. We will descend the servants' stairway which was used by you and Arsène Lupin when you escaped from Ganimard, and we will search together the means of communication with the adjoining house, which fronts on the Boulevard des Batignolles, and not upon the Rue Clapeyron." "Well, I will take Monsieur Destange to the Château de Crozon, and it will be easy for him who knows the nature of the work performed by Arsène Lupin in the restoration of the château, to discover the secret passages constructed there by his workmen. It will thus be established that those passages allowed the blonde lady to make a nocturnal visit to the Countess's room and take the blue diamond from the mantel, and 2 weeks later, by similar means, to enter the room of Herr Bleichen and conceal the blue diamond in his tooth powder. A strange action, I confess. A woman's revenge, perhaps, but I don't know, and I don't care." "Well, after that," said Herlock Sholmes in a more serious tone, "I will take Monsieur Destange to 134th Avenue, Henri Martin, and we will learn how the Baron d'Hautrec—" No, keep quiet," stammered the girl, struck with a sudden terror. "I forbid you. You dare to say that it was I? You accuse me?" "I accuse you of having killed the Baron d'Hautrec." No, it is a lie." "You killed the Baron d'Hautrec, mademoiselle. You entered his service under the name of Antoinette Bréhat for the purpose of stealing the blue diamond, and you killed him." "Keep quiet, monsieur," she implored him. "Since you know so much, you must know that I did not murder the Baron." "I did not say that you murdered him, mademoiselle. Baron d'Hautrec was subject to fits of insanity that only Sister Auguste could control. She told me so herself. In her absence, he must have attacked you, and in the course of the struggle you struck him in order to save your own life. Frightened at your awful situation, you rang the bell and fled without even taking the blue diamond from the finger of your victim. A few minutes later you returned with one of Arsène Lupin's accomplices, who was a servant in the adjoining house, You placed the Baron on the bed. You put the room in order, but you were afraid to take the blue diamond. Now I have told you what happened on that night. I repeat, you did not murder the Baron, and yet it was your hand that struck the blow." She had crossed them over her forehead, those long, delicate white hands, and kept them thus for a long time. At last, loosening her fingers, she said in a voice rent by anguish, "And do you intend to tell all that to my father?" "Yes, and I will tell him that I have secured as witnesses Mademoiselle Gerbois, who will recognize the blonde lady, Sister Auguste, who will recognize Antoinette Bréhat, and the Countess de Crozon, who will recognize Madame de Réal. That is what I shall tell him." "You will not dare," she said, recovering her self-possession in the face of an immediate peril. He arose and made a step toward the library. Clotilde stopped him. "One moment, monsieur." She paused, reflected a moment, and then, perfect mistress of herself, said, "You are Herlock Sholmes." "Yes. What do you want of me?" "What do I want? I am fighting a duel with Arsène Lupin, and I must win. The contest is now drawing to a climax, and I have an idea that a hostage as precious as you will give me an important advantage over my adversary. Therefore, you will follow me, mademoiselle. I will entrust you to one of my friends. As soon as the duel is ended, you will be set at liberty." "Is that all?" "That is all. I do not belong to the police service of this country, and consequently, I do not consider that I am under any obligation to cause your arrest." She appeared to have come to a decision, yet she required a momentary respite. She closed her eyes, the better to concentrate her thoughts. Sholmes looked at her in surprise. She was now so tranquil and apparently indifferent to the dangers which threatened her. Sholmes thought, does she believe that she is in danger? Probably not, since Lupin protects her. She has confidence in him. She believes that Lupin is omnipotent and infallible. "Mademoiselle," he said, "I told you that we would leave here in 5 minutes. That time has almost expired. Will you permit me to go to my room, monsieur, to get some necessary articles?" "Certainly, mademoiselle, and I will wait for you in the Rue Montchanin. Janniot, the concierge, is a friend of mine." "Ah, you know," she said, visibly alarmed. "I know many things. Very well, I will ring for the maid." The maid brought her hat and jacket. Then Sholmes said, "You must give Monsieur Destange some reason for our departure, and, if possible, let your excuse serve for an absence of several days." "That shall not be necessary. I shall be back very soon." They exchanged defiant glances and an ironic smile. "What faith you have in him," said Sholmes. "Absolute! He does everything well, doesn't he? He succeeds in everything he undertakes. And whatever he does receives your approval and cooperation." "I love him," she said with a touch of passion in her voice. "And you think that he will save you?" She shrugged her shoulders and, approaching her father, she said, "I am going to deprive you of Monsieur Stickman. We are going to the National Library. You will return for luncheon?" "Perhaps. No, I think not. But don't be uneasy." Then she said to Sholmes in a firm voice, "I am at your service, monsieur." "Absolutely?" "Quite so. I warn you that if you attempt to escape, I shall call the police and have you arrested. Do not forget that the blonde lady is on parole. I give you my word of honor that I shall not attempt to escape." "I believe you. Now, let us go." They left the house together, as he had predicted. The automobile was standing where Sholmes had left it. As they approached it, Sholmes could hear the rumbling of the motor. He opened the door, asked Clotilde to enter, and took a seat beside her. The machine started at once, gained the exterior boulevards, the Avenue Hoche, and the Avenue de la Grande Armée. Sholmes was considering his plans. He thought, Ganimard is at home. I will leave the girl in his care. Shall I tell him who she is? No, he would take her to prison at once, and that would spoil everything. When I am alone, I can consult my list of addresses taken from the Account MB and run them down. Tonight or tomorrow morning at the latest I shall go to Ganimard, as I agreed, and delivering to his hands Arsène Lupin and all his band. He rubbed his hand gleefully at the thought that his duel with Lupin was drawing to a close, and he could not see any serious obstacle in the way of his success. And, yielding to an irrepressible desire to give vent to his feelings, an unusual desire on his part, he exclaimed, "Excuse me, mademoiselle, if I am unable to conceal my satisfaction and delight. The battle has been a difficult one, and my success is, therefore, more enjoyable." "A legitimate success, monsieur, of which you have a just right to be proud." "Thank you, but where are we going? The chauffeur must have misunderstood my directions." At that moment they were leaving Paris by the Gate de Neuilly. That was strange, as the Rue Pergolese is not outside the fortifications. Sholmes lowered the glass and said, "Chauffeur, you have made a mistake. Rue Pergolese." The man made no reply. Sholmes repeated in a louder voice, "I told you to go to the Rue Pergolese." Still the man did not reply. "Ah, but you are deaf, my friend. Or is he doing it on purpose? We are very much out of our way. Rue Pergolese. Turn back at once. Rue Pergolese." The chauffeur made no sign of having heard the order. The Englishman fretted with impatience. He looked at Clotilde. A mysterious smile played upon her lips. "Why do you laugh?" he said. "It is an awkward mistake, but it won't help you." "Of course not," she replied. Then an idea occurred to him. He rose and made a careful scrutiny of the chauffeur. His shoulders were not so broad. His bearing was not so stiff and mechanical. A cold perspiration covered his forehead, and his hands clenched with sudden fear, as his mind was seized with the conviction that the chauffeur was Arsène Lupin. "Well, Monsieur Sholmes, what do you think of our little ride?" "Delightful, monsieur, really delightful," replied Sholmes. Never in his life had he experienced so much difficulty in uttering a few simple words without a tremor, or without betraying his feelings in his voice. But quickly, by a sort of reaction, a flood of hatred and rage burst its bounds, overcame his self-control, and brusquely drawing his revolver, he pointed it at Mademoiselle Destange. "Lupin, stop, this minute, this second, or I fire at Mademoiselle." "I advise you to aim at the cheek if you wish to hit the temple," replied Lupin, without turning his head. "Maxime, don't go so fast," said Clotilde. "The pavement is slippery, and I am very timid." She was smiling. Her eyes were fixed on the pavement, over which the carriage was traveling at enormous speed. "Let him stop! Let him stop!" said Sholmes to her, wild with rage. "I warn you that I am desperate." The barrel of the revolver brushed the waving locks of her hair. She replied calmly, "Maxime is so imprudent. He is going so fast. I am really afraid of some accident." Sholmes returned the weapon to his pocket and seized the handle of the door, as if to alight, despite the absurdity of such an act. Clotilde said to him, "Be careful, monsieur. There is an automobile behind us." He leaned over. There was an automobile close behind, a large machine of formidable aspect with its sharp prow and blood-red body, and holding 4 men clad in fur coats. "Ah, I am well guarded," thought Sholmes. "I may as well be patient." He folded his arms across his chest with that proud air of submission so frequently assumed by heroes when fate has turned against them. And while they crossed the river Seine and rushed through Suresnes, Rouet, and Chatou, motionless and resigned, controlling his actions and his passions, he tried to explain to his own satisfaction by what miracle Arsène Lupin had substituted himself for the chauffeur. It was quite improbable that the honest-looking fellow he had selected on the boulevard that morning was an accomplice placed there in advance, and yet Arsène Lupin had received a warning in some way, and it must have been after he, Sholmes, had approached Clotilde in the house, because no one could have suspected his project prior to that time. Since then, Sholmes had not allowed Clotilde out of his sight. Then, An idea struck him. The telephone communication desired by Clotilde, and her conversation with the dressmaker. Now, it was all quite clear to him. Even before he had spoken to her, simply upon his request to speak to her as the new secretary of Monsieur Destange, she had scented the danger, surmised the name and purpose of the visitor, and calmly, naturally, as if she were performing a commonplace action of her everyday life, she had called Arsène Lupin to her assistance by some preconcerted signal. How Arsène Lupin had come and caused himself to be substituted for the chauffeur were matters of trifling importance. That which affected Sholmes, even to the point of appeasing his fury, was the recollection of that incident whereby an ordinary woman, a sweetheart, it is true, mastering her nerves, controlling her features, and subjugating the expression of her eyes, had completely deceived the astute detective Herlock Sholmes. How difficult to overcome an adversary who was aided by such confederates, and who, by the mere force of his authority, inspires in a woman so much courage and strength. They crossed the Seine and climbed the hill at Saint-Germain, but some 500 meters beyond that town, the automobile slackened its speed. The other automobile advanced, and the two stopped, side by side. There was no one else in the neighborhood. "Monsieur Sholmes," said Lupin, "kindly exchange to the other machine. Ours is really a very slow one." "Indeed," said Sholmes, calmly, convinced that he had no choice. "Also, permit me to loan you a fur coat, as we will travel quite fast and the air is cool. And accept a couple of sandwiches, as we cannot tell when we will dine." The four men alighted from the other automobile. One of them approached, and, as he raised his goggles, Sholmes recognized in him the gentleman in the frock coat that he had seen at the Hungarian restaurant. Lupin said to him, "You will return this machine to the chauffeur from whom I hired it. He is waiting in the first wine shop to the right as you go up the Rue Legendre. You will give him the balance of the 1,000 francs I promised him. Ah, yes. Kindly give your goggles to Monsieur Sholmes." He talked to Mademoiselle Destange for a moment, then took his place at the wheel and started, with Sholmes at his side and one of his men behind him. Lupin had not exaggerated when he said, "We will travel quite fast." From the beginning he set a breakneck pace. The horizon rushed to meet them, as if attracted by some mysterious force, and disappeared instantly as though swallowed up in an abyss, into which many other things, such as trees, houses, fields, and forests, were hurled with the tumultuous fury and haste of a torrent as it approached the cataract. Sholmes and Lupin did not exchange a word. Above their heads, the leaves of the poplars made a great noise like the waves of the sea, rhythmically arranged by the regular spacing of the trees. And the towns swept by like specters, Manteo, Vernon, Gaillon. From one hill to the other, from Bon Secours to Canteleu, Rouen, its suburbs, its harbor, its miles of wharves, Rouen seemed like the straggling street of a country village. And this was Duclair, Caudebec, the country of Caen, which they skimmed over in their terrific flight, and Lillebonne and Quillebeuf. Then suddenly they found themselves on the banks of the Seine, at the extremity of a little wharf, beside which lay a staunch, sea-going yacht that emitted great volumes of black smoke from its funnel. The automobile stopped. In 2 hours they had traveled over 40 leagues. A man, wearing a blue uniform and a gold-laced cap, came forward and saluted. Lupin said to him, "All ready, Captain? Did you receive my telegram?" "Yes, I got it." "Is the Swallow ready?" "Yes, monsieur." "Come, Monsieur Sholmes." The Englishman looked around, saw a group of people on the terrace in front of a café, hesitated a moment, then, realizing that before he could secure any assistance he would be seized, carried aboard, and placed in the bottom of the hold, he crossed the gangplank and followed Lupin into the captain's cabin. It was quite a large room, scrupulously clean, and presented a cheerful appearance with its varnished woodwork and polished brass. Lupin closed the door and addressed Sholmes abruptly and almost rudely as he said, "Well, what do you know?" "Everything? Everything? Come, be precise." His voice contained no longer that polite, if ironical, tone, which he had affected when speaking to the Englishman. Now his voice had the imperious tone of a master accustomed to command and accustomed to be obeyed, even by a Herlock Sholmes. They measured each other by their looks, enemies now, open and implacable foes. Lupin spoke again, but in a milder tone. "I have grown weary of your pursuit, and do not intend to waste any more time in avoiding the traps you lay for me. I warn you that my treatment of you will depend on your reply. Now, what do you know?" "Everything, monsieur." Arsène Lupin controlled his temper and said, in a jerky manner, "I will tell you what you know. You know that, under the name of Maxime Bermond, I have improved 15 houses that were originally constructed by Monsieur Destange." "Yes. Of those 15 houses you have seen 4. "Yes. And you have a list of the other 11. "Yes." "You made that list at Monsieur Destange's house on that night, no doubt." "Yes." "And you have an idea that, amongst those 11 houses, there is one that I have kept for the use of myself and my friends, and you have entrusted to Ganimard the task of finding my retreat." "No." "What does that signify?" "It signifies that I choose to act alone, and do not want his help." "Then I have nothing to fear, since you are in my hands." "You have nothing to fear as long as I remain in your hands." "You mean that you will not remain?" "Yes." Arsène Lupin approached the Englishman, and placing his hand on the latter's shoulder, said, "Listen, monsieur. I am not in a humor to argue with you, and unfortunately for you, you are not in a position to choose. So let us finish our business." "Very well. You are going to give me your word of honor that you will not try to escape from this boat until you arrive in English waters." "I give you my word of honor that I shall escape if I have an opportunity," replied the indomitable Sholmes. "But sapristi, you know quite well that at a word from me you would soon be rendered helpless. All these men will obey me blindly. At a sign from me, they would place you in irons. Irons can be broken, and throw you overboard 10 miles from shore. I can swim." "I hadn't thought of that," said Lupin with a laugh. "Excuse me, master, and let us finish. You will agree that I must take the measures necessary to protect myself and my friends." "Certainly, but they will be useless." "And yet you do not wish me to take them." "It is your duty." "Very well, then." Lupin opened the door and called the captain and 2 sailors. The latter seized the Englishman, bound him hand and foot, and tied him to the captain's bunk. "That will do," said Lupin. "It was only on account of your obstinacy and the unusual gravity of the situation that I ventured to offer you this indignity." The sailors retired. Lupin said to the captain, "Let one of the crew remain here to look after Monsieur Sholmes, and you can give him as much of your own company as possible. Treat him with all due respect and consideration. He is not a prisoner, but a guest. What time have you, Captain?" 5 minutes after 2. Lupin consulted his watch, then looked at the clock that was attached to the wall of the cabin. 5 minutes past 2 is right. How long will it take you to reach Southampton? 9 hours, easy going. Make it 11. You must not land there until after the departure of the midnight boat, which reaches Havre at 8 o'clock in the morning. Do you understand, Captain? Let me repeat. As it would be very dangerous for all of us to permit Monsieur to return to France by that boat, you must not reach Southampton before 1 o'clock in the morning. I understand. Au revoir, master, next year, in this world or in the next. Until tomorrow, replied Sholmes. A few minutes later, Sholmes heard the automobile going away, and at the same time the steam puffed violently in the depths of the Swallow. The boat had started for England. About 3 o'clock, the vessel left the mouth of the river and plunged into the open sea. At that moment, Sholmes was lying on the captain's bunk, sound asleep. Next morning, it being the 10th and last day of the duel between Sholmes and Lupin, the Echo de France published this interesting bit of news. Yesterday, a judgment of ejectment was entered in the case of Arsène Lupin against Herlock Sholmes, the English detective. Although signed at noon, the judgment was executed the same day. At 1 o'clock this morning, Sholmes was landed at Southampton. Chapter 6. Second Arrest. O.F. Arsène Lupin. Since 8 o'clock, a dozen moving vans had encumbered the Rue Crevaux between the Avenue du Bois de Boulogne and the Avenue Bugeaud. Montcy. Felix Davey was leaving the apartment in which he lived on the 4th floor of number 8. And Mon. Dubray, who had united into a single apartment the 5th floor of the same house and the 5th floor of the 2 adjoining houses, was moving on the same day, a mere coincidence since the gentlemen were unknown to each other, the vast collection of furniture regarding which so many foreign agents visited him every day. A circumstance which had been noticed by some of the neighbors, but was not spoken of until later, was this. None of the 12 vans bore the name and address of the owner, and none of the men accompanying them visited the neighboring wine shops. They worked so diligently that the furniture was all out by 11 o'clock. Nothing remained but those scraps of papers and rags that are always left behind in the corners of the empty rooms. Mon. Felix Davey, an elegant young man, dressed in the latest fashion, carried in his hand a walking stick, the weight of which indicated that its owner possessed extraordinary biceps. Mon. Felix Davey walked calmly away and took a seat on a bench in the Avenue du Bois de Boulogne, facing the Rue Pergolese. Close to him a woman, dressed in a neat but inexpensive costume, was reading a newspaper, whilst a child was playing with a shovel in a heap of sand. After a few minutes, Felix Davey spoke to the woman, without turning his head. "Ganimard? Went out at 9 o'clock this morning." "Where?" "To police headquarters." "Alone?" "Yes." "No telegram during the night?" "No." "Do they suspect you in the house?" "No. I do some little things for Madame Ganimard, and she tells me everything her husband does. I have been with her all morning." "Very well. Until further orders come here every day at 11 o'clock. He rose and walked away in the direction of the Dauphine Gate, stopping at the Chinese pavilion, where he partook of a frugal repast consisting of 2 eggs, with some fruit and vegetables. Then he returned to the Rue Crevaux and said to the concierge, "I will just glance through the rooms and then give you the keys." He finished his inspection of the room that he had used as a library. Then he seized the end of a gas pipe, which hung down the side of the chimney. The pipe was bent, and a hole made in the elbow. To this hole he fitted a small instrument in the form of an ear trumpet and blew into it. A slight whistling sound came by way of reply. Placing the trumpet to his mouth, he said, "Anyone around, Dubray?" "No." "May I come up?" "Yes." He returned the pipe to its place, saying to himself, "How progressive we are! Our century abounds with little inventions which render life really charming and picturesque, and so amusing, especially when a person knows how to enjoy life as I do." He turned one of the marble moldings of the mantel, and the entire half of the mantel moved, and the mirror above it glided in invisible grooves, disclosing an opening and the lower steps of a stairs built in the very body of the chimney, all very clean and complete. The stairs were constructed of polished metal and the walls of white tiles. He ascended the steps, and at the 5th floor there was the same opening in the chimney. Dubray was waiting for him. "Have you finished in your rooms?" "Yes." "Everything cleared out?" "Yes." "And the people?" "Only the 3 men on guard." "Very well. Come on." They ascended to the upper floor by the same means, one after the other, and there found 3 men, one of whom was looking through the window. "Anything new?" "Nothing, Governor." "All quiet in the street?" "Yes." "In 10 minutes I will be ready to leave. You will go also. But in the meantime, If you see the least suspicious movement in the street, warn me. I have my finger on the alarm bell all the time. Dubreuil, did you tell the moving men not to touch the wire of that bell? Certainly. It is working all right. That is all I want to know. The two gentlemen then descended to the apartment of Felix Davy, and the latter, after adjusting the marble mantel, exclaimed, joyfully, Dubreuil, I should like to see the man who is able to discover all the ingenious devices, warning bells, networks of electric wires and acoustic tubes, invisible passages, moving floors and hidden stairways. A real fairyland. What fame for Arsène Lupin! Fame I could well dispense with. It's a pity to be compelled to leave a place so well equipped, and commence all over again, Dubreuil. And on a new model, of course, for it would never do to duplicate this. Curse Herlock Sholmes! Has he returned to Paris? How could he? There has been only one boat come from Southampton, and it left there at midnight. Only one train from Havre, leaving there at 8 o'clock this morning and due in Paris at 11:15. As he could not catch the midnight boat at Southampton, and the instructions to the captain on that point were explicit, he cannot reach France until this evening via Newhaven and Dieppe. Do you think he will come back? Yes, he never gives up. He will return to Paris, but it will be too late. We will be far away. And Mademoiselle Destange? I am to see her in an hour. At her house? Oh, no, she will not return there for several days. But you, Dubreuil, you must hurry. The loading of our goods will take a long time, and you should be there to look after them. Are you sure that we are not being watched? By whom? I am not afraid of anyone but Sholmes. Dubreuil retired. Felix Davy made a last tour of the apartment, picked up 2 or 3 torn letters, then, noticing a piece of chalk, he took it, and, on the dark paper of the drawing-room, drew a large frame and wrote within it the following. Arsène Lupin, Gentleman-burglar, lived here for 5 years at the beginning of the 20th century. This little pleasantry seemed to please him very much. He looked at it for a moment, whistling a lively air, then said to himself, Now that I have placed myself in touch with the historians of future generations, I can go. You must hurry, Herlock Sholmes, as I shall leave my present abode in 3 minutes, and your defeat will be an accomplished fact. 2 minutes more. You are keeping me waiting, Monsieur Sholmes. 1 minute more. Are you not coming? Well then, I proclaim your downfall and my apotheosis, and now I make my escape. Farewell, kingdom of Arsène Lupin. I shall never see you again. Farewell to the 55 rooms of the 6 apartments over which I reigned. Farewell, my own royal bedchamber. His outburst of joy was interrupted by the sharp ringing of a bell, which stopped twice, started again, and then ceased. It was the alarm bell. What was wrong? What unforeseen danger? Ganimard? No, that wasn't possible. He was on the point of returning to his library and making his escape. But, first, he went to the window. There was no one in the street. Was the enemy already in the house? He listened and thought he could discern certain confused sounds. He hesitated no longer. He ran to his library, and as he crossed the threshold, he heard the noise of a key being inserted in the lock of the vestibule door. The deuce, he murmured. I have no time to lose. The house may be surrounded. The servants' stairway. Impossible. Fortunately, there is the chimney. He pushed the molding. It did not move. He made a greater effort. Still, it refused to move. At the same time, he had the impression that the door below opened, and that he could hear footsteps. Good God, he cried. I am lost if this cursed mechanism. He pushed with all his strength. Nothing moved. Nothing. By some incredible accident, by some evil stroke of fortune, the mechanism, which had worked only a few moments ago, would not work now. He was furious. The block of marble remained immovable. He uttered frightful imprecations on the senseless stone. Was his escape to be prevented by that stupid obstacle? He struck the marble wildly, madly. He hammered it. He cursed it. "Ah, what's the matter, Monsieur Lupin? You seem to be displeased about something." Lupin turned around. Herlock Sholmes stood before him. "Herlock Sholmes!" Lupin gazed at him with squinting eyes, as if his sight were defective and misleading. Herlock Sholmes in Paris! Herlock Sholmes, whom he had shipped to England only the day before as a dangerous person, now stood before him free and victorious. Ah, such a thing was nothing less than a miracle. It was contrary to all natural laws. It was the culmination of all that is illogical and abnormal. Herlock Sholmes here, before his face. And when the Englishman spoke, his words were tinged with that keen sarcasm and mocking politeness with which his adversary had so often lashed him. He said, "Monsieur Lupin, in the first place, I have the honor to inform you that at this time and place I blot from my memory forever all thoughts of the miserable night that you forced me to endure in the house of Baron d'Autrec, of the injury done to my friend Wilson, of my abduction in the automobile, and of the voyage I took yesterday under your orders, bound to a very uncomfortable couch. But the joy of this moment effaces all those bitter memories. I forgive everything. I forget everything. I wipe out the debt. I am paid, and royally paid." Lupin made no reply. So the Englishman continued, "Don't you think so yourself?" He appeared to insist, as if demanding an acquiescence, as a sort of receipt in regard to the part. After a moment's reflection, during which the Englishman felt that he was scrutinized to the very depth of his soul, Lupin declared, "I presume, monsieur, that your conduct is based upon serious motives?" "Very serious. The fact that you have escaped from my captain and his crew is only a secondary incident of our struggle. But the fact that you are here before me alone, understand, alone, face to face with Arsène Lupin, leads me to think that your revenge is as complete as possible. As complete as possible. This house? Surrounded. The two adjoining houses? Surrounded. The apartment above this? The 3 apartments on the 5th floor that were formerly occupied by Monsieur Dubreuil are surrounded. So that you are captured, Monsieur Lupin, absolutely captured." The feelings that Sholmes had experienced during his trip in the automobile were now suffered by Lupin, the same concentrated fury, the same revolt, and also, let us admit, the same loyalty of submission to force of circumstances, equally brave in victory or defeat. "Our accounts are squared, monsieur," said Lupin frankly. The Englishman was pleased with that confession. After a short silence, Lupin, now quite self-possessed, said, smiling, "And I am not sorry. It becomes monotonous to win all the time. Yesterday I had only to stretch out my hand to finish you forever. Today I belong to you. The game is yours." Lupin laughed heartily and then continued, "At last the gallery will be entertained. Lupin in prison! How will he get out? In prison? What an adventure! Ah, Sholmes, life is just one damn thing after another." He pressed his closed hands to his temples as if to suppress the tumultuous joy that surged within him, and his actions indicated that he was moved by an uncontrollable mirth. At last, when he had recovered his self-possession, he approached the detective and said, "And now, what are you waiting for?" "What am I waiting for?" "Yes, Ganimard is here with his men. Why don't they come in?" "I asked him not to." "And he consented?" "I accepted his services on condition that he would be guided by me. Besides, he thinks that Felix Davey is only an accomplice of Arsène Lupin." "Then I will repeat my question in another form. Why did you come in alone?" "Because I wish to speak to you alone." Ah, you have something to say to me." That idea seemed to please Lupin immensely. There are certain circumstances in which words are preferable to deeds. "Monsieur Sholmes, I am sorry I cannot offer you an easy chair. How would you like that broken box? Or perhaps you would prefer the window ledge? I am sure a glass of beer would be welcome, light or dark. But sit down, please. Thank you. We can talk as well standing up. Very well, proceed." "I will be brief. The object of my sojourn in France was not to accomplish your arrest. If I have been led to pursue you, it was because I saw no other way to achieve my real object, which was to recover the blue diamond. The blue diamond! Certainly, since the one found in Herr Bleichen's tooth powder was only an imitation. Quite right. The genuine diamond was taken by the blonde lady. I made an exact duplicate of it, and then, as I had designs on other jewels belonging to the Countess, and, as the consul Herr Bleichen was already under suspicion, the aforesaid blonde lady, in order to avert suspicion, slipped the false stone into the aforesaid consul's luggage, while you kept the genuine diamond. Of course, that diamond, I want it. I am very sorry, but it is impossible. I have promised it to the Countess de Crozon. I must have it. How will you get it, since it is in my possession? That is precisely the reason, because it is in your possession. Oh, I am to give it to you? Yes. Voluntarily? I will buy it. Ah, exclaimed Lupin in an access of mirth. You are certainly an Englishman. You treat this as a matter of business. It is a matter of business. Well, what is your offer? The liberty of Mademoiselle Destange. Her liberty? I didn't know she was under arrest. I will give Monsieur Ganimard the necessary information. When deprived of your protection, she can readily be taken. Lupin laughed again and said, My dear monsieur, you are offering me something you do not possess. Mademoiselle Destange is in a place of safety, and has nothing to fear. You must make me another offer. The Englishman hesitated, visibly embarrassed and vexed. Then, placing his hand on the shoulder of his adversary, he said, And if I should propose to you? My liberty? No, but I can leave the room to consult with Ganimard. And leave me alone? Yes. Ah, mon Dieu, what good would that be? The cursed mechanism will not work, said Lupin, at the same time savagely pushing the molding of the mantle. He stifled a cry of surprise. This time fortune favored him. The block of marble moved. It was his salvation, his hope of escape. In that event, why submit to the conditions imposed by Sholmes? He paced up and down the room, as if he were considering his reply. Then, in his turn, he placed his hand on the shoulder of his adversary and said, All things considered, Monsieur Sholmes, I prefer to do my own business in my own way. But, no, I don't require anyone's assistance. When Ganimard gets his hand on you, it will be all over. You can't escape from them. Who knows? Come, that is foolish. Every door and window is guarded. Except one. Which? The one I will choose. Mere words. Your arrest is as good as made. Oh, no, not at all. Well, I shall keep the blue diamond. Sholmes looked at his watch and said, It is now 10 minutes to 3. At 3 o'clock I shall call Ganimard. Well then, we have 10 minutes to chat. And to satisfy my curiosity, Monsieur Sholmes, I should like to know how you procured my address and my name of Felix Davy. Although his adversary's easy manner caused Sholmes some anxiety, he was willing to give Lupin the desired information since it reflected credit on his professional astuteness. So he replied, Your address? I got it from the blonde lady. Clotilde! Herself. Do you remember, yesterday morning, when I wished to take her away in the automobile, she telephoned to her dressmaker. Well? Well, I understood, later, that you were the dressmaker, and last night, on the boat, by exercising my memory, and my memory is something I have good reason to be proud of, I was able to recollect the last 2 figures of your telephone number, 73. Then, as I possessed a list of the houses you had improved, it was an easy matter, on my arrival in Paris at 11 o'clock this morning, to search in the telephone directory and find there the name and address of Felix Davy. Having obtained that information, I asked the aid of Monsieur Ganimard. Admirable, I congratulate you. But how did you manage to catch the 8 o'clock train at Havre? How did you escape from the Swallow? I did not escape. But you ordered the captain not to reach Southampton before 1 o'clock. He landed me there at midnight. I was able to catch the 12 o'clock boat for Havre. Did the captain betray me? I can't believe it. No, he did not betray you. Well, what then? It was his watch. His watch? Yes, I put it ahead 1 hour. How? In the usual way, by turning the hands. We were sitting side by side talking, and I was telling him some funny stories. Why, he never saw me do it. Bravo! A very clever trick. I shall not forget it. But the clock that was hanging on the wall of the cabin? Ah, the clock was a more difficult matter, as my feet were tied, but the sailor, who guarded me during the captain's absence, was kind enough to turn the hands for me. He? Nonsense. He wouldn't do it. Oh, but he didn't know the importance of his act. I told him I must catch the first train for London at any price, and he allowed himself to be persuaded. By means of a slight gift which the excellent fellow, loyal and true to his master, intends to send to you. What was it? A mere trifle. But what? The blue diamond! The blue diamond! Yes, the false stone that you substituted for the Countess's diamond. She gave it to me. There was a sudden explosion of violent laughter. Lupin laughed until the tears started in his eyes. Mon Dieu, but it is funny! My false diamond palmed off on my innocent sailor, and the captain's watch, and the hands of the clock. Sholmes felt that the duel between him and Lupin was keener than ever. His marvelous instinct warned him that, behind his adversary's display of mirth, there was a shrewd intellect debating the ways and means to escape. Gradually, Lupin approached the Englishman, who recoiled and, unconsciously, slipped his hand into his watch pocket. "It is 3 o'clock, Monsieur Lupin." 3 o'clock already? What a pity. We were enjoying our chat so much. I am waiting for your answer. My answer? Mon Dieu, but you are particular. And so this is the last move in our little game, and the stake is my liberty, or the blue diamond. Very well. It's your play. What are you going to do? I play the king, said Sholmes as he fired his revolver. And I the ace, replied Lupin as he struck at Sholmes with his fist. Sholmes had fired into the air, as a signal to Ganimard, whose assistance he required. But Lupin's fist had caught Sholmes in the stomach, and caused him to double up with pain. Lupin rushed to the fireplace and set the marble slab in motion. Too late. The door opened. Surrender, Lupin, or I fire! Ganimard, doubtless stationed closer than Lupin had thought. Ganimard was there, with his revolver turned on Lupin, and behind Ganimard there were 20 men, strong and ruthless fellows, who would beat him like a dog at the least sign of resistance. Hands down, I surrender, said Lupin calmly, and he folded his arms across his breast. Everyone was amazed. In the room, divested of its furniture and hangings, Arsène Lupin's words sounded like an echo. I surrender. It seemed incredible. No one would have been astonished if he had suddenly vanished through a trap, or if a section of the wall had rolled away and allowed him to escape. But he surrendered. Ganimard advanced, nervously, and with all the gravity that the importance of the occasion demanded, he placed his hand on the shoulder of his adversary and had the infinite pleasure of saying, I arrest you, Arsène Lupin. Brrr, said Lupin. You make me shiver, my dear Ganimard. What a lugubrious face. One would imagine you were speaking over the grave of a friend. For heaven's sake, don't assume such a funereal air. I arrest you. Don't let that worry you. In the name of the law, of which he is a well-deserving pillar, Ganimard, the celebrated Parisian detective, arrests the wicked Arsène Lupin, an historic event of which you will appreciate the true importance, and it is the second time that it has happened. Bravo, Ganimard! You are sure of advancement in your chosen profession. And he held out his wrists for the handcuffs. Ganimard adjusted them in a most solemn manner. The numerous policemen, despite their customary presumption and the bitterness of their feelings toward Lupin, conducted themselves with becoming modesty, astonished at being permitted to gaze upon that mysterious and intangible creature. My poor Lupin, sighed our hero, what would your aristocratic friends say if they should see you in this humiliating position? He pulled his wrists apart with all his strength. The veins in his forehead expanded. The links of the chain cut into his flesh. The chain fell off, broken. Another, comrades. That one was useless. They placed 2 on him this time. Quite right, he said. You cannot be too careful. Then, counting the detectives and policemen, he said, How many are you, my friends? 25? 30? That's too many. I can't do anything. Ah, if there had been only 15. There was something fascinating about Lupin. It was the fascination of the great actor who plays his role with spirit and understanding, combined with assurance and ease. Sholmes regarded him as one might regard a beautiful painting with a due appreciation of all its perfection in coloring and technique. And he really thought that it was an equal struggle between those 30 men on one side, armed as they were with all the strength and majesty of the law, and on the other side, that solitary individual, unarmed and handcuffed. Yes, the 2 sides were well matched. Well, master, said Lupin to the Englishman, this is your work. Thanks to you, Lupin is going to rot on the damp straw of a dungeon. Confess that your conscience pricks you a little, and that your soul is filled with remorse. In spite of himself, Sholmes shrugged his shoulders as if to say, It's your own fault. Never, never, exclaimed Lupin. Give you the blue diamond? Oh, no, it has cost me too much trouble. I intend to keep it. On my occasion of my first visit to you in London, which will probably be next month, I will tell you my reasons. But will you be in London next month? Or do you prefer Vienna or St. Petersburg? Then Lupin received a surprise. A bell commenced to ring. It was not the alarm bell, but the bell of the telephone which was located between the 2 windows of the room and had not yet been removed. The telephone! Ah! Who could it be? Who was about to fall into this unfortunate trap? Arsène Lupin exhibited an access of rage against the unlucky instrument, as if he would like to break it into 1,000 pieces and thus stifle the mysterious voice that was calling for him. But it was Ganimard who took down the receiver and said, Hello, hello, number 648, 73. Yes, this is it. Then Sholmes stepped up and, with an air of authority, pushed Ganimard aside, took the receiver, and covered the transmitter with his handkerchief in order to obscure the tone of his voice. At that moment he glanced toward Lupin, and the look which they exchanged indicated that the same idea had occurred to each of them, and that they foresaw the ultimate result of that theory. It was the blonde lady who was telephoning. She wished to telephone to Felix Davy, or rather to Maxime Bermond, and it was to Sholmes she was about to speak. The Englishman said, Hello, hello. Then, after a silence, he said, Yes, it is I, Maxime. The drama had commenced and was progressing with tragic precision. Lupin, the irrepressible and nonchalant Lupin, did not attempt to conceal his anxiety, and he strained every nerve in a desire to hear, or, at least, to divine the purport of the conversation. And Sholmes continued, in reply to the mysterious voice, Hello, hello, yes, everything has been moved, and I am just ready to leave here and meet you as we agreed. Where? Where you are now. Don't believe that he is here yet. Sholmes stopped, seeking for words. It was clear that he was trying to question the girl without betraying himself, and that he was ignorant of her whereabouts. Moreover, Ganimard's presence seemed to embarrass him. Ah, if some miracle would only interrupt that cursed conversation! Lupin prayed for it with all his strength, with all the intensity of his incited nerves. After a momentary pause, Sholmes continued. Hello? Hello? Do you hear me? I can't hear you very well. Can scarcely make out what you say. Are you listening? Well, I think you had better return home. No danger now. But he is in England. I have received a telegram from Southampton announcing his arrival. The sarcasm of those words! Sholmes uttered them with an inexpressible comfort, and he added, Very well, don't lose any time. I will meet you there. He hung up the receiver. Monsieur Ganimard, can you furnish me with 3 men? For the blonde lady, eh? Yes. You know who she is and where she is? Yes. Good. That settles Monsieur Lupin. Folenfant, take 2 men and go with Monsieur Sholmes. The Englishman departed, accompanied by the 3 men. The game was ended. The blonde lady was, also, about to fall into the hands of the Englishman. Thanks to his commendable persistence and to a combination of fortuitous circumstances, the battle had resulted in a victory for the detective and in irreparable disaster for Lupin. Monsieur Sholmes, the Englishman stopped. Monsieur Lupin? Lupin was clearly shattered by this final blow. His forehead was marked by deep wrinkles. He was sullen and dejected. However, he pulled himself together, and notwithstanding his defeat, he exclaimed, in a cheerful tone, "You will concede that fate has been against me. A few minutes ago, it prevented my escape through that chimney and delivered me into your hands. Now, by means of the telephone, it presents you with the blonde lady. I submit to its decrees." What do you mean? I mean that I am ready to reopen our negotiation. Sholmes took Ganimard aside and asked, in a manner that did not permit a reply, the authority to exchange a few words with the prisoner. Then he approached Lupin and said, in a sharp, nervous tone, "What do you want?" Mademoiselle Destange's liberty. You know the price. Yes. And you accept? Yes. I accept your terms. Ah, said the Englishman in surprise, but you refused. For yourself. Yes, I can look out for myself, Monsieur Sholmes, but now the question concerns a young woman, and a woman I love. In France, understand, we have very decided ideas about such things, and Lupin has the same feelings as other people. He spoke with simplicity and candor. Sholmes replied by an almost imperceptible inclination of his head, and murmured, "Very well, the blue diamond. Take my cane there, at the end of the mantle. Press on the head of the cane with one hand, and with the other turn the iron ferrule at the bottom." Holmes took the cane and followed the directions. As he did so, the head of the cane divided and disclosed a cavity which contained a small ball of wax, which, in turn, enclosed a diamond. He examined it. It was the blue diamond. Monsieur Lupin, Mademoiselle Destange is free. Is her future safety assured? Has she nothing to fear from you? Neither from me, nor anyone else. How can you manage it? Quite easily. I have forgotten her name and address. Thank you, and au revoir, for I will see you again sometime, Monsieur Sholmes. I have no doubt of it. Then followed an animated conversation between Sholmes and Ganimard, which was abruptly terminated by the Englishman, who said, "I am very sorry, Monsieur Ganimard, that we cannot agree on that point, but I have no time to waste trying to convince you. I leave for England within an hour, but the blonde lady? I do not know such a person, and yet, a moment ago, you must take the affair as it stands. I have delivered Arsène Lupin into your hands. Here is the blue diamond, which you will have the pleasure of returning to the Countess de Crozon. What more do you want? The blonde lady? Find her." Sholmes pulled his cap down over his forehead and walked rapidly away, like a man who is accustomed to go as soon as his business is finished. "Bon voyage, monsieur," cried Lupin, "and believe me, I shall never forget the friendly way in which our little business affairs have been arranged. My regards to Monsieur Wilson." Not receiving any reply, Lupin added sneeringly, "That is what is called taking British leave. Ah! Their insular dignity lacks the flower of courtesy by which we are distinguished. Consider for a moment, Ganimard, what a charming exit a Frenchman would have made under similar circumstances. With what exquisite courtesy he would have masked his triumph. But God bless me, Ganimard, what are you doing? Making a search? Come, what's the use? There is nothing left, not even a scrap of paper. I assure you my archives are in a safe place." "I am not so sure of that," replied Ganimard. "I must search everything." Lupin submitted to the operation. Held by 2 detectives and surrounded by the others, he patiently endured the proceedings for 20 minutes. Then he said, "Hurry up, Ganimard, and finish." "You are in a hurry." "Of course I am. An important appointment." "At the police station?" "No, in the city." "Ah, at what time?" 2 o'clock. "It is 3 o'clock now." "Just so. I will be late. And punctuality is one of my virtues." "Well, give me 5 minutes." "Not a second more," said Lupin. "I am doing my best to expedite." "Oh, don't talk so much. Still searching that cupboard?" "It is empty." "Here are some letters." "Old invoices, I presume?" "No. A packet tied with a ribbon." "A red ribbon? Oh, Ganimard, for God's sake, don't untie it." "From a woman?" "Yes." "A woman of the world?" "The best in the world." "Her name?" "Madame Ganimard." Very funny," exclaimed the detective. At that moment, the men, who had been sent to search the other rooms, returned and announced their failure to find anything. Lupin laughed and said, "Parbleu! Did you expect to find my visiting list, or evidence of my business relations with the Emperor of Germany? But I can tell you what you should investigate, Ganimard. All the little mysteries of this apartment. For instance, that gas pipe is a speaking tube. That chimney contains a stairway. That wall is hollow. And the marvelous system of bells. Ah, Ganimard, just press that button." Ganimard obeyed. "Did you hear anything?" asked Lupin. "No." "Neither did I. And yet you notified my aeronaut to prepare the dirigible balloon, which will soon carry us into the clouds." "Come," said Ganimard, who had completed his search. "We've had enough nonsense. Let's be off." He started away, followed by his men. Lupin did not move. His guardians pushed him in vain. "Well," said Ganimard, "do you refuse to go?" "Not at all. But it depends." "On what?" "Where you want to take me." "To the station house, of course." "Then I refuse to go. I have no business there." "Are you crazy? Did I not tell you that I had an important appointment?" "Lupin!" "Why, Ganimard, I have an appointment with the blonde lady, and do you suppose I would be so discourteous as to cause her a moment's anxiety? That would be very ungentlemanly." "Listen, Lupin," said the detective, who was becoming annoyed by this persiflage. "I have been very patient with you, but I will endure no more. Follow me." "Impossible. I have an appointment, and I shall keep it. For the last time, follow me." Impossible." At a sign from Ganimard, 2 men seized Lupin by the arms, but they released him at once, uttering cries of pain. Lupin had thrust 2 long needles into them. The other men now rushed at Lupin with cries of rage and hatred, eager to avenge their comrades and to avenge themselves for the many affronts he had heaped upon them. And now they struck and beat him to their heart's desire. A violent blow on the temple felled Lupin to the floor. "If you hurt him, you will answer to me," growled Ganimard in a rage. He leaned over Lupin to ascertain his condition. Then, learning that he was breathing freely, Ganimard ordered his men to carry the prisoner by the head and feet, while he himself supported the body. "Go gently now!" "Don't jolt him." "Ah, the brutes would have killed him." "Well, Lupin, how goes it?" "None too well, Ganimard. You let them knock me out." "It was your own fault. You were so obstinate," replied Ganimard. "But I hope they didn't hurt you." They had left the apartment and were now on the landing. Lupin groaned and stammered. "Ganimard, the elevator. They are breaking my bones." "A good idea, an excellent idea," replied Ganimard. "Besides, the stairway is too narrow." He summoned the elevator. They placed Lupin on the seat with the greatest care. Ganimard took his place beside him and said to his men, "Go down the stairs and wait for me below. Understand?" Ganimard closed the door of the elevator. Suddenly the elevator shot upward like a balloon released from its cable. Lupin burst into a fit of sardonic laughter. "Good God!" cried Ganimard as he made a frantic search in the dark for the button of descent. Having found it, he cried, "The 5th floor! Watch the door of the 5th floor!" His assistants clambered up the stairs, 2 and 3 steps at a time. But this strange circumstance happened. The elevator seemed to break through the ceiling of the last floor, disappeared from the sight of Ganimard's assistants, suddenly made its appearance on the upper floor, the servants' floor, and stopped. 3 men were there waiting for it. They opened the door. 2 of them seized Ganimard, who, astonished at the sudden attack, scarcely made any defense. The other man carried off Lupin. "I warned you, Ganimard, about the dirigible balloon. Another time, don't be so tender-hearted. And, moreover, remember that Arsène Lupin doesn't allow himself to be struck and knocked down without sufficient reason. Adieu." The door of the elevator was already closed on Ganimard, and the machine began to descend, and it all happened so quickly that the old detective reached the ground floor as soon as his assistants. Without exchanging a word, they crossed the court and ascended the servants' stairway, which was the only way to reach the servants' floor through which the escape had been made. A long corridor with several turns and bordered with little numbered rooms led to a door that was not locked. On the other side of this door, and therefore in another house, there was another corridor with similar turns and similar rooms, and at the end of it a servants' stairway. Ganimard descended it, crossed a court and a vestibule, and found himself in the Rue Picot. Then he understood the situation. The 2 houses, built the entire depth of the lots, touched at the rear, while the fronts of the houses faced upon 2 streets that ran parallel to each other at a distance of more than 60 meters apart. He found the concierge, and, showing his card, inquired, "Did 4 men pass here just now?" "Yes, the 2 servants from the 4th and 5th floors, with 2 friends." "Who lives on the 4th and 5th floors?" "2 men named Fauvel and their cousins, whose name is Provost. They moved today, leaving the 2 servants who went away just now." "Ah," thought Ganimard, "what a grand opportunity we have missed. The entire band lived in these houses." And he sank down on a chair in despair. 40 minutes later 2 gentlemen were driven up to the station of the Northern Railway and hurried to the Calais Express, followed by a porter who carried their valises. One of them had his arm in a sling, and the pallor of his face denoted some illness. The other man was in a jovial mood. "We must hurry, Wilson, or we will miss the train. Ah, Wilson, I shall never forget these 10 days. Neither will I. Ah, it was a great struggle. Superb. A few repulses here and there, of no consequence. And at last, victory all along the line. Lupin arrested, the blue diamond recovered. My arm broken. What does a broken arm count for in such a victory as that? Especially when it is my arm. Ah, yes, don't you remember, Wilson, that it was at the very time you were in the pharmacy, suffering like a hero, that I discovered the clue to the whole mystery? How lucky! The doors of the carriages were being closed. All aboard! Hurry up, gentlemen! The porter climbed into an empty compartment and placed their valises in the rack, whilst Sholmes assisted the unfortunate Wilson. What's the matter, Wilson? You're not done up, are you? Come, pull your nerves together. My nerves are all right. Well, what is it, then? I have only one hand. What of it? Exclaimed Sholmes cheerfully. You are not the only one who has had a broken arm. Cheer up. Sholmes handed the porter a piece of 50 centimes. Thank you, Monsieur Sholmes, said the porter. The Englishman looked at him. It was Arsène Lupin. You, he stammered, absolutely astounded, and Wilson brandished his sound arm in the manner of a man who demonstrates a fact as he said, You, but you were arrested. Sholmes told me so. When he left you, Ganimard, and 30 men had you in charge. Lupin folded his arms and said, with an air of indignation, Did you suppose I would let you go away without bidding you adieu? After the very friendly relations that have always existed between us, that would be discourteous and ungrateful on my part. The train whistled. Lupin continued. I beg your pardon, but have you everything you need? Tobacco and matches, yes. And the evening papers? You will find in them an account of my arrest. Your last exploit, Monsieur Sholmes. And now, au revoir. Am delighted to have made your acquaintance. And if ever I can be of any service to you, I shall be only too happy. He leaped to the platform and closed the door. Adieu, he repeated, waving his handkerchief. Adieu. I shall write to you. You will write also, eh? And your arm broken, Wilson? I am truly sorry. I shall expect to hear from both of you. A postal card now and then. Simply address Lupin, Paris. That is sufficient. Adieu. See you soon.